The work of Lev Vygotsky has become the foundation of much research and theory in cognitive development over the past several decades, particularly of what has become known as sociocultural theory. Vygotsky's theory stresses the fundamental role of social interaction in the development of cognition. He strongly believed that community and language play a central role in the learning process. Unlike Piaget's notion that children's development must necessarily precede their learning, Vygotsky argued learning is a necessary and universal aspect of the process of developing culturally organized, specifically human psychological function. In other words, Vygotsky argued that social learning tends to precede or come before development. We can say then that Vygotsky rejected Piaget's ideas and believed that children develop independently of specific stages of development as the result of social interactions. Vygotsky talks about the idea of people having two psychological planes inside their mind. He said that we have an intrapersonal and an interpersonal plane. He also emphasized that it is the interpersonal plane which influences the intrapersonal one. In other words, the sociocultural environments in which we are involved have an impact on the way we think and the way we behave. Another important thing to keep in mind in sociocultural theory is the role of language. Vygotsky argued that when a person is thinking of doing something, the person will always use language as a tool for thinking and doing. Vygotsky's view of intelligence was focused on the capacity to learn. He claimed that we are born with 4 elementary functions: attention, sensation, perception, and memory. He said that eventually, through interaction with our social and cultural environment, these 4 elementary functions develop into more sophisticated and effective mental processes. He also emphasized that the development of these 4 elementary functions ideally happens in the zone of proximal development. Vygotsky defined the zone of proximal development as the distance between the actual developmental level as determined by independent problem solving and the level of potential development as determined through problem solving under the guidance or collaboration with more capable peers. Simply put, the zone of proximal development refers to the distance between actual development and potential development. First, there is what we can do on our own, and then there is the zone of proximal development, which represents what we can do with the help of more knowledgeable others. And last, there is what is beyond our reach. I will attempt to illustrate the ZPD, or zone of proximal development, in terms of language learning with one of my personal experiences learning English. In the Mexican educational system, English as a foreign language is taught when students are around 12 years old. Nobody really knows English unless you have attended since a very young age one of those schools that are bilingual or where they teach American or British English, or if you have been taught English in a private school. At home, my mom had taught us, my sister and I, a very basic level of English because she was very good at languages and she was a teacher herself, so she was always kind of experimenting with us by teaching us different subjects, and English was one of her favorite ones. Her approach was very practical. I really don't remember how I learned it. It was more something that it was embedded in our day-to-day communication. I remember being able to interact with her without any conscious effort because it was part of our day-to-day interaction. So we can say that, in a way, I had internalized this very basic level of English that she used to communicate with us, and that it was easy for me to produce. Now, things changed when I entered secondary school. The first year was very easy for me. All the things that we were supposed to be learning, I already knew them, and I remember enjoying a lot these classes. However, as I went into my second grade of secondary school and the lessons started to get more difficult, The basic knowledge that I had was not sufficient. For me, the zone of proximal development emerged when, with the help of the teacher and with the assistance of those peers who acted at the time as more knowledgeable others, I started to use the new structures and the vocabulary that we were learning. We can say then that ZPD, or the zone of proximal development, happens in situations where there is a skillful tutor, such as a parent or a teacher or a peer, someone with relevant experience to help us, someone who through actions, instructions, questions, encouragement is there for us. It is important to clarify that ZPD occurs or happens in educational situations where we are in interaction with more knowledgeable others. It is important to understand then that ZPD is not in someone's head. We are not born with a ZPD. ZPD occurs in educational situations when we are interacting with more knowledgeable others. So when we are talking about ZPD, elements such as the sociocultural, the interpersonal versus intrapersonal, language as a tool, thinking, doing, participating, interacting, all of those elements are present. Gallimore and Tharp are two scholars that talk about the notion of capable others or more knowledgeable others to help us. In line with the ideas of Vygotsky, they say that to see what the learner's potential is, we need a parent, a teacher, a peer, an expert, or someone that has the relevant experience to help. Gallimore and Tharp developed a 4-stage model of progression through the zone of proximal development, and it is the first and the second stage that we're going to discuss. In stage 1, learners are presented with new material, concepts, new vocabulary, new structures, and they receive help of others in order to be able to progress. This assistance can take many forms, but it is often characterized by being in a social setting. In other words, in this first stage, there is a need of a capable other, someone that will be there with you and say, how about this? What about that? With such a type of assistance and encouragement, you may show all this potential you have. So, stage 1 happens in a situation where there is someone helping you. Stage 2 is the period where the learner alone or in groups revisits this material and gains understanding of it. It is important that the learner is able to gain an understanding of the material and that is able to build on this learning in the future. In this stage, the learner goes through, revisits, and engages with the learning materials that have been previously introduced. We can say that in this stage, the learner's engagement with the materials is done in a conscious and in a self-regulated way. This kind of self-regulation can be seen when students use different learning strategies to help themselves. So, for example, if they know how they learn and they know how to motivate themselves and they use different strategies in order to help themselves in these processes, we can see then that this is a type of assistance provided by the self. Going back to the example I provided about my own experience learning English, we have said that the ZPD emerged when I was trying to use the new vocabulary and the structures that I had not mastered yet, and that I was doing this with the assistance provided by the teacher and more capable others or other peers. Based on the ideas of Gallimore and Tharp, the zone of proximal development was also emerging whenever I made the decision, the conscious decision, of making an effort to learn by myself. So if I constantly revised the learning materials, if I used different learning strategies that I knew were useful to help myself in the learning process, if I searched for information, if I motivated myself, all of those things were a type of self-regulation which enabled that zone of proximal development to be present and to be emerging. At that point in time, I remember understanding that for me it was easier to visualize things, So I remember creating a lot of memory games, you know, these cards that you have a picture and then the word. I would create diagrams to remember the grammatical structures. So yeah, in a way, I knew myself as a learner. I knew how I best learned, and I assisted myself in the process of learning, which is basically the contribution to the zone of proximal development that Gallimore and Tharp made. They're not leaving it all to the teachers or the more capable others. There's also the awareness that you, as the person who's interacting in that sociocultural environment, in that dialogue, in that conversation, in that learning process, you have a type of agency to assist yourself in the learning process. In conclusion, Gallimore and Tharp argued that the ZPD becomes visible when someone helps you or you help yourself. Have a look at the handout. You'll see that over time, different scholars have created different visualizations of the ZPD. How does your own visualization of the ZPD look like? Is it similar or different to any of the ones that we have presented in the handout? Don't forget to tell us why it's similar or different. Thank you for watching this video until the end. This was an introduction to sociocultural theory.